The main problem of Rio Grande do Sul, RS Brazil, and other areas across the equator and the world vulnerable for flooding and related calamities are not per se rain or controllable water masses, but flash floods. Flash floods destroy everything, and are what flood and destroy cities, ports, crops, lands, erosion of top layer and emission of carbon dioxide, pampas, Atlantic rainforest, Mata Atlantica, etc. A flash flood or flood is nothing more than one or more flash floods that come together and become a flash flood or a flood. An example that demonstrates the difference between a lot of water and flash flooding can be seen in the Netherlands, which is 1/3 below sea level and on top of that receives the largest rivers in Europe, all without problems, until now, because flash floods are prevented from happening. In the case of RS and other places that suffer from floods, what resolves is a significant transformation of monocultures into enriched agroforests, because the soil with the roots of the trees and the microbial enriched soils, ADE, of these agroforests are capable of absorbing and draining all the water in excess to the aquifers. Enriched agroforests, also called carbon agroforests in this channel, with deep humus, produce and yield 100 times more than monocultures, without or with shallow humus. A simplified way to understand this extreme productivity of enriched agroforests is to remember that this is because their producing total biomass is also 100 times more, with that biomass much deeper into the soil and in cases up in the air to close to 100 meters, including effective pumping out of deep aquifers and biotic pump effect which causes clouding and rain forming combined with the in cases of drought by trees generated and in the atmosphere pumped rain generating tree particles, like aerosols or etheric oils. The produced biomass is varied and exists of food for humans and animals, renewable fuels like gas and hydrogen, but also oil derivate alternatives, enhanced and selected high-quality wood products and a wide range and massive amounts of basic materials for the industries, including advanced materials like graphite and graphene, with the latter achieving prices of the order of magnitude of gold per gram for certain grades. Foods for humans include nutrient-dense superfoods, nuts, acai, avocados, mangoes, coconuts, fish, meat, and staple crops like cassava, potatoes, corn, vegetables, etc. Indigenous people that uniquely and systematically feed themselves on the above carbon agroforest foods, Amazon forest, present the best heart and brain health of all people of the world and present near absence of degenerative diseases including Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. This is presented in others' videos of this channel and parallel channels. All this despite that they never retire from their activities and present high inflammatory markers because of their inflammatory lifestyle and total lack of healthcare. The water drains from the agroforest to the aquifer, as if it were tap water passing through a sieve that controls the water but allows it to pass through well. Where the danger of flooding exists, a solution is to surround several properties with agroforests with dikes of 2 meters or more. Let's agree to call them tank agroforests or T-agroforests. The ideal is for these tank agroforests to be established at higher levels, topographically higher level, compared to the cities, ports, etc., which are at risk of flooding, and on both sides of the river or downhill paths where floods can descend. The soils of these tank agroforests absorb the water and sediment, filter any dirt, organic, that was pumped into the tank agroforests. This principle could be similar to how Amazon Amerindians created or rather enriched their Amazon dark earth soil terra preta of the Amerindians, which is typical for the Amazon forest in the times before Columbus, when it still was densely inhabited by Amerindians for thousands of years, in order to create the exceptionally fertile soils, developments, and cultures. The caretakers of the tank agroforests decide whether they consider the sediments that could have settled on top of the soil to be favorable for fertility and ADE soil formation, or unfavorable. As the water entered in a controlled and filtered way through the tank agroforests, the sediments in general will be very favorable for the fertility of the soils of the tank agroforests, similar to the Nile River Delta in Egypt and the river deltas in Mesopotamia and again to the ADE soils in the Amazon forest. Tank agroforests are surrounded by simple dikes, made of sand or other semi-permeable or even impermeable materials, and are therefore safer than agroforests without dikes and also have unprecedented potential and additional benefits. Similar dikes can be found by the Amazon Amerind's enriched regions forests, and we hypothesize that at least part of them had a similar purpose, possibly together with still other purposes. These dikes are or could be open at all times and will only be closed when there is a flood warning. If a significant flood could pass through the area, the ideal would be to protect vulnerable dikes with stones, vegetation, etc., against erosion of the dike. However, agroforests with their immense root systems already protect simple dikes, this even without additional stone or other protection. If necessary, earth tanks, reservoirs or lagoons could be excavated within these tank agroforests, something that would yield the material to reinforce the dikes from within and on the outside, or make them or fish ponds more impermeable. Organic materials can have a similar function. The resulting tanks within these tank agroforests can prevent flooding, even when water will be pumped into these tank agroforests to alleviate and protect insufficient prepared cities, ports and crops further down, topographically. Certain of these agroforest tanks will be filled with, roughly filtered, excess water, to prevent flash floods, this in a controlled manner, and such controlled fillings will not harm the agroforests, that in its turn will control, filter, absorb and drain the water to the aquifer. In fact, the boles of the trees and their roots will also fill with water, measurable girth increments, and eventually increase evapotranspiration in before increasing the buffer capacity. Pumping, with gravity and if necessary with electrical energy or in other ways, of the waters collected and decanted within these agroforests tanks, can be pumped to or drained to, up and next beyond the heads of rivers in the region, rivers, from another region, in the case of RS into the Uruguay River and all its tributaries, that do not flow into areas that suffer from flooding. They would further complete the already complete protection of the agroforest's tank's joint effort and efficacy. In the ideal case, these tank agroforests already can be found close to the river heads. The distance to be pumped, or drained, may be short, in theory could be only meters away. When you look at any map with the rivers of Rio Grande do Sul, presenting the river basins and subbasins, you will notice that the watershed areas and number of rivers that do not go to areas with critical flooding and floods, that direct to the river Uruguay, are much larger than the rivers they go to the areas susceptible to flooding, towards Porto Velho and Lagoa dos Patos.
To be continued, starting with more in-depth info and additional measures against certain increasingly occurring calamities.